some. He says, I do all this for the sake of the gospel that I may share in its blessing. So what is he trying to say there when he makes that statement that says, I've become all things to all people? What do you think? Okay. What's that? Trying to relate to people. Okay, trying to make it applicable. I like that. What else? Okay, being a servant to him. Jacob, I see you out there. If you don't mind watching that streaming, we don't have anybody in the sound room. He's hiding. We don't have anybody in the sound room if you want to make sure that's working right. Thank you. He's a good man. Fantastic. So yeah, so he's trying to establish relationships, trying to make things applicable to all people, trying to be a servant, as Barry said. What else you think about when you hear that? Does anybody read that and hear anything negative? I guess is what I want to get at. Come at from that side. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So let me just let's use me as an example here. I'll use myself. So when I'm standing up on Sunday or Wednesday and I'm teaching you guys, do you think that I use the same language or even the same style as I do when I teach 7th and 8th graders? None of you know what the word slay probably means, do you? Yeah. Any of you ever heard the word skibbity before? No, you haven't, right? But that's the language they use every day. I did a little search with them the other day about the top 3 new slang words in the year 2024, and that was the top 2, slay and skibbity. And you have no idea what those mean, right? I think 3 was the word riz, which is a way of saying charisma. Somebody's charismatic, but you've got riz. Edward, on his laptop, when he turns in assignments, it says Edward the Rizmeister on his. That's. So I wouldn't talk to you guys as adults in the same way that I talk to those 7th and 8th graders. Why? Okay, you're not in the same age. You wouldn't know what I was talking about. So you do have to communicate in different ways with different people. Other people might say, well, that's negative. That's not being authentic. That's not being who you are, right? That could come across as offensive, right? If I, went and I spoke and did one style of presentation here, and I went to an all-black congregation and changed up my speech patterns and used different vocabulary, and then I went to a majority Hispanic population and did the same thing, it would almost come across as cultural appropriation in some way, or, that might be offensive. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about being who you are and being authentic and being real, but having, and I like the way Barry talked about it, having the humility to figure out how to relate to all people. And that's so important. And as we enter this next section of this book that we're using as a text, it's going to call this next section Marketing the Church. And when I first read that several years ago in this book, it made me a little uncomfortable. Why would it make us uncomfortable to use a phrase like marketing the church? You think? Okay, sounds materialistic. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think so. It's making himself less is a great way to explain that. Like you said, he's, this great educated traveling preacher that, can speak several languages and, is an apostle, but yet he's figured out how to talk and communicate to lots of different people. That's a great way to think about it. So, marketing is a word. So, what do you usually think about when you hear the word marketing? Okay, something for sale. Okay. I want you to hold on to that. We're going to come back. If you didn't hear David, he said different techniques. We'll come back to that. What else? Okay. Yeah, money. Marketing something in the way that you can make the most money out of it. Was that our goal in the church? So if we were to say we're marketing the church, what would be the purpose of marketing the church? What would be our currency? Okay, in some ways, yeah, Barry. Okay. So I think you guys are on the same page, right? It's the currency or the product is God's word. But what is instead of making money from marketing the church, what is our ultimate goal to win? Souls, right? People. And so that is what we're trying to get. So in some ways, you do have to market things, right? There's a story in this book about a guy named Joe. He was a member of the singles program at the church, and they had an outing on Saturday. And they were playing volleyball, and this young girl named Janet came up. She had already been playing, so she had a little bit of sand on her. Her hair was pulled up in a messy bun. She had on a baggy sweatshirt with holes in it, and some sweatpants and tennis shoes, and he barely paid any attention to her. And so the next morning, when he walked into their Bible class, there was this stunning woman sitting there, right? Beautiful dress, makeup fixed to a T, her hair was fixed, and he said, who is this woman? And they introduced her, and of course it's Janet. Now, why didn't he notice her on Saturday, but the first thing that he saw on Sunday was her? What was the difference? The way she looked, the way she was presented. Yeah, and so that does matter, right? It matters. I've been here for 10 years, and we have changed our church logo. I think we just changed it for the 4th time since I've been here. There was one when I got here. In the very, I think, first year, we got a new logo. Then a few years ago when Caleb was here, we built a new logo. And then this past year, we built another new logo. Why? Why would you do that? All the logos were fine. None of them were bad. Why did we change them? Yeah, first impressions. Okay, maybe more relevant to who we are. More eye-catching, right? What are... I wish I could have had time to build a PowerPoint to show you this. What are some of the most recognizable logos in the country or in the world? Okay, describe a Coke logo to me. Yeah, red, right? The red and white and silver. Do you know, though, that Coca-Cola has made lots of tweaks and changes to their logo over the years? Most of them just have to do with the font. Why would you change the font of a logo and just to tweak it that much? What do you think? Yeah, to not date yourself, right? You want it to look modern. Or if you wanted to do the opposite and you wanted to make it look retro, right? You'd do that. If I was to put up there a G with several different colors on it, rainbow colors in a G, what is that? Google. If I was to put up an apple with a bite taken out of it, what company is that? That's Apple. That's pretty easy, isn't it? If I was to put up a red V with what looks like cell phone bars coming out beside it, what is that? Verizon. If I was to put up, I don't know, I'm trying to think of some more very recognizable logos. If you go near a store that sells tools and it's orange, which one is that? If it's blue, what is it? If I'm in it, which one is it? Harbor Freight. But anyway, those are very, very recognizable. If you go to a store and the outside of it is blue and yellow and it has everything that you need, what kind of store is that? If you were to go in a time machine and go back 30 years to a store very similar that had a different blue, what store was that? That was Kmart, right? I forgot all about poor old Kmart, didn't you? If you were to go to a restaurant and you look way up in the sky and it has some golden arches, where are you? Yep. If you go right down the street and you see something similar but it's a crown instead of arches, where are you? Burger King. So, Those are logos. That's how those are instantly recognizable logos. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. That's true. That's absolutely true. Hmm. Yeah. But the logo is important, right? Because it helps describe who you are. So let's think about this in terms of evangelism. Let's think of it in terms of evangelism. So repackaging, right? Sometimes necessary. I'm trying to think of a company. Okay, we'll use ETC as a company. It's here in town. How many of you, when you were growing up, had ETC television and a home phone? Home phone. Y'all didn't grow up with a home phone? Yeah. Well, okay. If you're from here, I forget some people are not from here. But you used to have it. Where was your phone? It was either up on the wall with a long cord, or down here, and you did this. If you got grandkids, go show them a rotary phone and watch them try to work it. It's so funny. Or, in the 90s, we got cordless phones. You could go 10 feet, right, without a cord. Okay, let's just use, how many of you had a home phone growing up? How many of you have a home phone now? All right, all the old people, okay. All right. Why? Why don't you have a home phone anymore? Because you got cell phones, right? Yeah, you use too many calls, and, if anybody needs you, they can get you on your cell phone. You're probably not going to be at home anyway. Yeah. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, you dated yourself right there. Did you have to crank the front of the car, too, to get it going? Oh. Yeah. We went to visit Sybil yesterday, me and the elders visitor, and she was talking about when she moved to Atlanta, and she was talking about how long it took. And I said, yeah, when you ride a horse and carriage somewhere, it takes a long, long time to get there. She almost threw me out of the house, but she didn't. She should have, right? How many of you still have, Winston, you don't count because you work for the company and get it for free. How many of you still have cable in your house? Old school cable, coaxial, into the wall? How many of you use internet cable like YouTube TV, Sling TV? Uh-oh. Well, now ETC's in trouble. They don't have home phones anymore, and they don't have, internet anymore. Cable anymore. So how are they? Yeah, how are they still in, Winston, how are y'all still in business? How are they still in business, David? Yeah, now, instead of ETC having to rely on you buying their cable and their home phone, now you have to buy their internet. How many of you have internet in your house? Wi-Fi? Almost every one of you, right? Oh, okay, you're cut off from the staircase, but... Okay. I got you. So you can get the robocalls. Well, Janita, when they unlock the door and let y'all upstairs, do you use the internet sometimes? Oh, okay, well. But most people are using the internet, right? So that's how ETC has gotten you now. They have repackaged themselves. They are no longer a telephone company. They are now a wireless company in most respects. And some people still pay for the cable, and ETC can still provide you with a number of cable options, but they've had to change the way they're branding. And, and they will continue to change. Cable will change. Everything will change about that. And as long as they're able to stay relevant, they can survive. But if ETC said, you know what, all this fiber optic stuff and all that. We're going to continue to use coax cable, and we're going to continue to provide home phone services. What would happen to them pretty quickly? They'd go out of business, right? Well, we're going to get to that. You're right, but hang on. How many of you use a phone book anymore? I didn't even know they still made a phone book until they just said that right there. Yeah, it's about that thick. What's your phone book now? Hey Siri, what's the phone number to LJ Church of Christ? Right? That's what we do. When's the last time you went into a Blockbuster Video? Anybody been to one lately? There is one Blockbuster Video left. It is in the city of Bend, Oregon. It's the last one that exists. When's the last time you've been into a Circuit City or a Radio Shack? Been a while, right? Yeah, so did Circuit City. Why'd they go out of business? Yes. So, when you market something, that you have to be willing to make the proper changes to repackage it. Now, we're gonna hear the point that Ms. Teresa made, which is this: the product that we are marketing has not changed. The product that we are marketing has not changed, or has it? What do you think? Okay. Okay, Barry. Okay, I think that's so important, right? If you need a car, what do you need a car for? Transportation to get from point A to point B, right? That's the product. That's never going to change, right? You need something to get you from point A to point B. How it happens, though, is a lot different. How many of you drive a diesel truck? Y'all are killing the environment, right? I can't believe it, right? How many of you drive gasoline vehicle? Most of us. Anybody own an electric car? Bob Berkowitz is not in here. Tiffany Baker's not in here. They own electric vehicles. Will they all do the same thing? But they do it in different ways, right? So here's the point I want to get to. God's word, the gospel message, Christ and Him crucified, has not changed. It will never change. But the way that we present it to people and the way that people respond to it has changed. Our methods of sharing that have changed, right? I have in my office in there N.B. Hardeman's Tabernacle Sermons. Y'all ever heard of those? Anybody know where those were delivered? Ryman Auditorium, Nashville, Tennessee. And people filed in the doors to hear Brother Hardeman preach. What do you think would happen now if we said, all right, we're going to have a gospel meeting and we're going to host it at the Ryman Auditorium? How many people would show up? Not many. How many people would stream it? Maybe. But people wouldn't show up. Because the days, in part, of us saying, hey, we're going to have this event, show up, those days are in large part over. Why? What's changed? Excuse me. Okay, maybe. Society has changed, right? People have changed. Okay, maybe. We'll come back to that. So let's use this as an example. So, visiting. I started preaching in 2009. This is year 16. When I started preaching, which is not that long ago, one generation of people almost, when you went to go visit, you just got in your car, you drove to the person's house, and you knocked on the door, right? And they opened it and they let you in. Now, when we go visiting, guess what we have to do first? Call ahead. Why? Okay. Yeah. So that's actually a big. So let's think about sales, right? Anybody ever do door-to-door sales? Maybe as a young person. Okay, door-to-door sales. When you went during the day, who was at home? The mother or the wife was at home, and you could sell them the book, and they say, "Oh, I have to wait till my husband gets home," right? Well, what's changed about that now? Women work, in most cases. And if they don't, mothers who are at home by themselves don't tend to answer the door because we now are privy, unfortunately, to all the evil that exists in the world. So how do you do sales now? Do people go door to door anymore? Anybody showed up trying to sell magazines at your door lately? How do we do it now? Television or online, right? That's how we do it. Or maybe through the mail, right? Absolutely. Okay, Saturday morning, you're at home in your pajamas, and the doorbell rings or somebody's knocking. They're standing there. They have on a white dress shirt and starched khakis with pamphlets in their hand. Who is it? Or Jehovah's Witness or the Mormon elders, right? We're in church, so don't lie in the church building. What are you doing? So you answer the door? Oh, okay. Tell me the truth. How many? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Did they do a better job turning around than I did with the van and the trailer at the top of the driveway? Yeah. Of course not. Yeah. Yeah. So I think if we're all being honest, we all turn the lights off real fast and tell the kids, shh, right, they'll go away. Um,
We did have someone, not here, but another time, and Lloyd said he would listen to them if they would listen to what he had to say, and they didn't want to because they had to go get someone else that would
Yeah.
talk with them.
Yeah, the last time that I encountered when I was outside and they said, hey, do you know Jesus Christ? I said, yeah, I'm actually a preacher at the Church of Christ. And they said, have a nice day, sir. They didn't want to engage in that. Clay? Yeah. Yeah. And listen, tip of the cap to those folks that do cold canvassing like that. I am not going to ever stand up here and say that door knocking does not work. And Matt Wallen's a good buddy of mine. He's going to be here at our Men's Day, and they have an annual door knocking day through house to house. And they set up Bible studies, and they reach people, so I don't want to discount it. But frankly, the conversions through door knocking in 2025 are very few and far between. So then, what do we do? What do we do? This book was written in the mid-90s, and so in some ways it's obsolete, but they give two principles in the chapter I think really are good. The first principle is having to, well, they're both really having to do with relationships. And the first way that they say churches really truly reach people is finding the hurts in the community and healing them. Now, what do we mean by that when we say finding the hurts in the community and healing them? What does that mean? Yeah, it's through benevolence, right? Curtis handles our benevolence because he just don't like to stay at home, apparently. But he handles our benevolence, unless it's cold and there's a fire in his fireplace. But he handles the benevolence. And we have people come in all the time that are hungry. And I'll tell you this church has never once in the 10 years that I've been here, turned away a hungry person without giving them food. And, and we usually do that in the form of food vouchers so they can go and get what they need. We have physically carried people to the Gilmer Food Pantry. We have never turned away a hungry person. We have never turned away a person who needed heat or electricity where we could possibly help them. Now, we don't go and pay giant bills all the time, but we contribute and we help and we try to figure out how to help the person find the money that they need. So when people are without power or they're in need or they need food or whatever it is, we try to heal those hurts. And we don't just give them money. Curtis sends them mails and gives them a Bible and tries to set up Bible studies. We have, in the past couple of years, handed out diapers. We've handed out candy at Halloween events. We've found people. We've given away school supplies. We had so much fun that day last year giving away school supplies. It was 176 degrees outside, but we set up the snow cone machine and handed out snow cones and school supplies and tried to set up Bible studies that way. That's the kind of things that we're talking about doing. But not just even welcoming people to our building, but going and finding those folks. That's how you reach people who are hurting and trying to find the healing. In the New Testament, there are about 40 examples of Jesus healing people that were hurting in some way. I want you to hold on to that number because we're going to come back to it. So the first principle is finding people that were hurting and then healing them. The second principle for successful conversions has to do with small group Bible studies, or what they call neighborhood Bible studies. We love to invite people to church on Sunday, and that's great. But hearing one sermon is more than likely not going to teach someone how to become a Christian. Are there principles of the gospel in that? Yes. But when I prepare a Sunday morning sermon, it has to be at least a little nuanced for you guys to digest it, right? Because you guys have been a Christian, some of you for 50, 60, pop 70 years, right? You've been a Christian a long time. If I just get up and preach the same message every Sunday, you're not going to get it. So on Sunday morning, when we're preaching to the saved, we deal with issues and we deal with foundational prayer. We deal with all of those things. And it's important that we understand that there has to be more Bible study than that. And the effective, proven, data-driven, empirically shown way to do that is through small group studies, whether it's one-on-one or in small groups together where people can ask questions and digest that. That's why we see these churches that do small groups. That's why we see them exploding in number. And that's why the elders have seen fit, not completely change the way we do things, but to add that to our repertoire of meetings so that people can have that small group feeling and small group relationships. Yes, ma'am.
I'm thinking about what you're saying about you're preaching to us. Our part in that is the command is to go.
Yeah.
What we need to do is take what you are teaching us and go and teach someone else.
Yeah. And so I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good transition. So I told you that how many examples do we read about Jesus healing people in the New Testament? 40. Out of those 40, how many of those people do you think just showed up and found Jesus? Out of those 40, how many think they came to Jesus and said, Jesus, I'm here, heal me? How many do you think? Well, that too, and you're right, but how many people Jesus is walking down the road and the people said, here I am, Jesus, heal me? How many think out of 40? 6. How do you think the other 34 came to Jesus? Somebody brought them. They said, you need healing. I'm going to bring you to the source of healing, and that's Jesus. So I want to ask you guys this question. How many of you, when you became a Christian, you showed up at church and the preacher preached a sermon and you said, that sounds pretty good. I think I'll walk down the aisle and be saved. How many of you did that? Okay, how many of you, let's use this example. How many of you grew up in the church and you studied with your parents or you studied with a preacher and you figured out what you need to do and that's how you became a Christian? Okay, a lot of us. How many of you were invited to church by someone who set up a study for you and taught you the gospel and you became a Christian that way? So what does that tell us about how people are saved? It's that personal relationship that's going to help us reach souls. There's some statistics in here. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you couldn't hear what Teresa said, she said, how many of us did that when we were younger, right? Because when we get older, we kind of get set in our ways, right? But this was a survey, and this, like I said, this has been several years ago now, but this was 4,000 people that were polled as to how they were influenced to first attend the services of the church that they eventually became a member of. The Institute of American Church Growth. 2 to 3% said they just walked in. 2 to 3%. Another 2 to 3% said they came through the church's programs, right? So when we say programs, we mean things like Vacation Bible School or some kind of giveaway or whatever it might be. 5 to 6% were attracted by the preacher. How about that? Out of 100, 5 or 6 will come to church because of the preacher, right? That's pretty good. 1 to 2% came out of a special need. That's those folks who show up for benevolence. 1 to 2% were reached through visitation by church members. 4 to 5% came through a Sunday school class, and less than 1%, listen to me now, less than 1% came through a public evangelism crusade. So if you take all those numbers and add them up, that leaves you with 75 to 90%, with the flexibility there. 75 to 90% were converted through the influence of friends and relatives. I might be talking myself out of a job here, but I want to tell you this. You guys are way more important to this church than I am. Why? Absolutely. On my Facebook account the other day, I looked. I think I have about 2,500 friends on Facebook. Seems like a lot of people. But if we were to add up collectively, for those of you that know what Facebook is, if this was a younger crowd, this would be a better illustration. It'd be a lot more than 2,500, wouldn't it, collectively? How many of you have lived in this community your whole life? Lived in this community your whole life? I've been here 10 years. I know a ton of people. But it never fails. We'll be sitting at lunch with somebody, and somebody will come up to Mark Pettit and go, "Oh, Mark, how you doing?" And I'll say, "Mark, who's that?" And that's old Curly Joe Williams. He grew up over there on the back streets of Dogleg Gap, and and he's dug a well for my granddaddy one time. I don't know who those people are, but Mark does. Huh? Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yesterday, I was trying to figure out how we were going to get from Blue Ridge to Big Creek Road without having to go all the way. And Mark, driving 85 miles an hour, took us to Aska Road to Doublehead Gap, is that right? And then on to Big Creek Road. And it took us like 6 minutes to get there. Barry Kingsley, I was driving and Barry was literally car sick. We were trying to keep up with Mark. But, because Mark's been driving those roads his whole life, and he can tell me every person that lives on that road. So he has a lot more of an opportunity to reach those people than I do. And so it's the collectivism that we have to have that reaches people. And you guys are so much more important in that, than a preacher or even our leaders. All right, there's a lot more I want to say, but I don't think we're going to have time to. But be thinking about this week, be identifying people who you can reach, and be thinking about new ways to do this. Things have changed, right? How many of you get more than 5 pieces of mail every day? I don't. There are 2 or 3 days a week where there's no mail in my mailbox. Why? Why is there no mail in my mailbox? Because you didn't send me cards, bunch of meanies. No. Why is there no mail in my mailbox? Yep. How do I pay my bills? Online. Almost all of them. Pay my bills online. I'm not subscribed to any magazines. I'm not subscribed to any newspaper. I read the how do you say the newspaper here, Mark? The Times Courier. Just ignore that R in there. I get that on my phone. So every Wednesday morning when I wake up, the newspaper is on my telephone. No, I'm not reading the Pickens Progress. Although I did see today, for those of you that live in the next county south with me, in the new Publix, there's going to be a chicken salad chick right next door to the Publix. I'm really excited about that. So Chicken Salad Chick. It's a chicken salad restaurant. They have all these flavors. It's so good. But so I don't get that. But guess what? Guess what I get on my phone all day long? Notifications on Facebook. Notifications on Instagram. Y'all know what that is? Notifications on TikTok. Notifications on Snapchat. That has replaced that. How do I communicate with you guys mostly? The phone or Facebook. I post almost every single day, either on our church Facebook page or our members' Facebook group. And most of you see it, right? So all those things have changed. And so we need to remember that when we share the gospel with people and when we're teaching people, we need to do it in a way that doesn't matter. And I'll leave you with this final illustration. Think about a restaurant, right? Has the best food you've ever had in your life. But when you go in the restaurant, as soon as you sit down, the flies do a swan dive onto the table. You look down, there's roaches and sawdust all over the floor. The waiters and waitresses look like they just finished shooting up in the parking lot. The place doesn't smell really good. The bathrooms are not clean. How likely are you to return to this restaurant? You're not likely to stay, right? But how often does the restaurant like that get new management? And they clean up the floor, and they get rid of all the flies, and they make sure the bathrooms are clean, and they replace the waiters and waitresses with nice uniforms. How likely are you to go to that same restaurant with the same food? A lot more likely. If their health score goes from a 70 to a 100, we're likely to try it again, right? Same food, different presentation, and they say in business. Well, for us, as we think about presenting the gospel, we have to apply some of those principles in that way. All right. Thank you guys for listening. We'll have a quick break, and then we'll get to our Devo. Hit home, huh? I'm satisfied with just a cottage below, a little silver and a little gold. But in that city where the ransom will shine, I want a gold one that's silver lined. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop, in that bright land where we'll never grow old. And someday yonder we will never more wander, but walk the streets that are purest gold. Don't think me poor or deserted or lonely. I'm not discouraged.
Can you hear me now? All right, thank you for being with us tonight. Hope everybody's doing well. Just a few announcements. Mike Nichols is back at home and he's doing better. Kathy Johnson is recovering from COVID. Dan Weaver was released to go home and he is on hospice. And Clea Boaz is still in the nursing home with rehab. This Sunday, the His group, number 1, this is Jason and Emma White's group, will meet and have a potluck in the fellowship hall following the morning service. So if you're part of that group, remember that. That will be this Sunday following the morning service. Also, there will be an elders and deacons meeting this Sunday at 4:30, so remember that as well. On the 7th of February, there's a Valentine's dinner scheduled, and there is a sign-up list on the love board for that. And also on the 9th, there is a Super Bowl party, and there's more information to come, so put that on your list as well. That's all the announcements I have. Anything that I overlooked? Okay, thank you very much for being here. We'll turn the service over to Brother David.
Let's sing number 800, What a Friend We Have in Jesus. What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. Have we trials and temptation? Is there trouble anywhere? We should never be discouraged. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Can we find a friend so faithful who will all our sorrows bear? Jesus knows our every weakness. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Are we weak and heavy laden, cumbered with a load of care? Precious Savior, still our refuge. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Do thy friends despise, forsake thee? Take it to the Lord in prayer. In his arms he'll take and shield thee. Thou wilt find a solace there.
Well, good evening. Hope everybody is having a great week, and we appreciate you being here tonight. If you have your Bibles, we're going to look at a passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 3 as we have a devotional thought here to end our night. Been talking to my middle schoolers over the last several days about the words that they use and the way that they talk. I was teaching here in the auditorium tonight, and Winston Pettit was the youngest person in the room by about 40 years. And so we were talking about language, right? I did a quick Google search with my middle schoolers last week, and we looked at the top 3 new slang words for the year. The first one was slay. I know what slay means. Some of you do. The second word was the word skibbity, which if you research it, the word skibbity has absolutely no meaning. And the meaning is based on the context of which you use it. I think the third word was the word riz, which if you are a person who speaks the English language, you will know is an abbreviation of the word charisma, right? But the way that we talk to people and the way that we communicate with people is different, right? I have to speak to adults in a different way than I speak to kids. You have to speak to people in different ways based on who your audience is. Well, the way that we communicate with people is of the utmost importance. Not just because of the words we use. James chapter 3 says that sometimes with the same mouth we have out of one part blessing and out of the other part cursing. I thought about that today during chapel. We were singing the song, How Great Is Our God. We sing that song here, and it's a beautiful song, you know. The splendor of a king clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. And we often follow that up with a song that's written in the same key. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee, how great thou art. And I thought about sitting there singing that, and some of those kids, not most of them, but some of them, as soon as that was over, started picking on their friends and calling them names and using words that weren't very godly. And we do the same thing. On Sunday morning, we're here at worship, and we sing praises to God, and then we get out, and somebody cuts us off in traffic, and the language is not the same, right? But words are more important still, not just because of that, but because of the power that they hold. I read an illustration this week about a man who was just enamored with a very beautiful woman. And what he wanted to say to her was, when I'm around you, time stands still. Pretty great line, isn't it? But instead he said, I just want you to know you have a face that could stop a clock. Didn't go quite as well, right? It's the same sentiment, same message, but the wrong words. We talked about in our class here tonight that people very rarely come to the gospel from big evangelistic crusades or even sermons or even the preacher. Statistics show that between 5 and 6% of the people who join a church join because of the preacher. The rest of them join because they were brought to Christ by someone they love, someone they know, someone who was willing to share the gospel with them. And here in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, it's a passage that I think about all the time. We used 1 Corinthians as a case study the other day, and we read a little bit of this passage, but we didn't have time to dive in it as much as I would like. He says, starting in verse 5, what after all is Apollos, and what is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord has assigned to each his task. If you, highlight in your Bible or you make notes out, I want you to pay special attention to these verses. Bracket them, highlight them, right beside them, whatever you want to do. Verse 6, he says, I planted the seed. That kind word, fitly spoken, that little message about who Jesus is, that little reminder about faith to your friend or your neighbor might be the seed that needs to be planted so that they can come to know Christ. But he says, I planted the seed and Apollos watered it. After that initial seed is planted, it takes care and cultivation for growth. That's the job of our fellow church members. That's the Bible studies that we have at our kitchen tables. He says, I planted, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. Or some of your versions will say, God is the one that gave the increase. Our words are so important, not just because we don't use bad language or because of the words that we use, but our words are important because our words have the power, if we use them correctly, to lead someone to Jesus. That's why our words matter. And so as you go this week and you think about the words that you're saying, the topics of your conversation, let me challenge you. Talk a little less about politics and a little more about Jesus. Talk a little less about your work and a little more about the church. Talk a little less about sports and a little more about the Bible. Talk a little less about things that don't matter and a little more about things that will last forever. And I want to close with this verse from Ephesians chapter 4 that you know very well. Do not let any unwholesome talk, this is verse 29 of Ephesians 4, come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. And let me add a caveat to that verse, which I don't think is changing the context. When you talk to people, talk about Christ. And that is what will build people up. So I hope you'll think about that this week as you go about your daily walks of life. And tonight, if there's any need that you have that the church can help with, we would love for you to come forward. We can pray with you and pray for you. Or if tonight you're ready to put on Christ in baptism, we would love to help you with that as well as we stand in